family, colleagues, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate that. I wanted to see how I could see my people, but that's fine. So, white rage. You came here to talk about white rage. This is important. This is an important subject. Good afternoon. This is an important subject to talk about due to our racial climate. We've seen so many book clubs and talks. I'm sure everyone here has Zoom fatigue on the plethora of subjects, but I am so happy that you continue to look for education in these spaces. The more we're educated, the more we're armed with information that can help us move forward change. And so this particular workshop is aimed at both people of color, Black people, and our white counterparts or allies. And we're going to talk about white rage, but I also want to talk about in the fight, I guess, of tackling white rage, I want to bring in Black fatigue, or you might hear racial battle fatigue. You might hear it said in different ways, but as we dissect white rage, and as you can see, this is a bestseller from Dr. Carol Anderson, where she talked about what white rage is. The fact that we have to fight off white rage creates a lot of Black fatigue, and I just want to share that. And sometimes we as Black people may not know that we're experiencing Black fatigue because we're so used to going through it. Additionally, we might carry it as a badge of honor, that it is our duty. We have a sense of having to uplift and nurture our communities. And so I do want to address that. I want to tell you something practical that I've done just now that I'm looking down at. I put on my diffuser with some turmeric. So that's one way I battle some of my Black fatigue. I went to work today for about 10 hours and having to navigate workplaces. I'm gonna talk about that. Creates a lot of Black fatigue, but we're also going to talk about the Black fatigue that you have to fight in the community. So this diffusing helps me in taking care of myself to handle all the things that we have to go through. If you're just entering the room, please go ahead and mute yourselves, please. So let's get into it. So what is white rage? Let's start there. White rage defined here on your screen. The trigger for white rage is Black advancement. I can stop right there, okay? I can stop right there. So right now in the climate we're in, it seems everywhere I look, I see myself. I see my marketing friend here on here, Miss Anitra, and I think about all the times that I see myself now in advertising, marketing, social media, everywhere I look. I remember being so stunned in the mall as I went from store to store and I saw people that looked like me in the advertisements. And it became almost an insult that was not welcomed. That, oh wow, look, they're valuing, you know, who I am and my people and things like that, but more of a pacifier, right? A bandage. And so as companies, organizations, and workplaces are attempting to put these issues at the forefront, and it may seem like it's, and we'll share more what Carol was talking about these movements that occur. when it seems like Blacks are about to advance in some kind of way, we're about to move ahead in some type of way, we're always met with white rage, or rage in general, outrage for the audacity of us to advance. And so I just wanted to stop there at Black advancement. The mere presence of Black people is not the problem. They're okay with us there, right? We can serve in entry-level positions or subservient positions. As long as we don't advance, it's okay. We're tolerable. We can be tolerable, right? So the mere presence of Black people is not the problem. Rather, when you come with ambition, when you come with drive, purpose, aspiration, resolve, resilience, initiatives, or with demands, that's when you are met with white rage, okay? Blackness that refuses to accept subjugation, to give up, and unwilling to take no for an answer. The fact that Blacks, after enduring horrific histories, and let me add to this, modern day barriers that are put in our way, the fact that we continue to advance, it's an ultimate affront, and it causes white rage. So I was trying to recall my very first encounter, and I'm sure my Black counterparts on the call have different experiences. So as my bio read, I am from the segregated South. So I don't remember a lot of the white rage in my younger years. Maybe I wasn't developed enough to even spot it. I'm sure it was there, but I was engulfed in a very segregated community, meaning I was surrounded by Black people for the most part. So I didn't get any of that. But I remember when I made 16 years old and I began to work for NASA NASA, the space people. Yeah, I had a student worker position that I was able to get into. Why? Because my grandfather worked there in a very entry-level subservient position. And he was able to be there for years and talk with someone in human resources. I think there was one Black woman, and said, can you get my granddaughter in this student worker position? And he was able to do that. And I was one of the only Black girls in that big white organization. And I then was faced with some white rage. Like, what are you doing here? How'd you get in here? And I remember a personal experience with a white woman. And she said, you know, your body, and I was in college, I was a freshman in college. And she said, your body is so nice. You should go and work at Coyote Ugly. Now, Coyote Ugly, you all probably maybe seen the movie or heard of it, but in New Orleans, it's the bar, like on Bourbon Street, where you dance half naked, or I don't know, maybe they're naked, I don't know, on top of the counter, on top of the bar, right? Flaunting your body. And I was thinking, I went home to tell my grandmother, why would she say that? Like, I'm obviously an intelligent student that was able to, you know, get employment here and keep employment here. Why would she suggest I use my body to go and dance on top of somebody's bar on Bourbon Street and think that was appropriate? And so my answer to her at the time, I was pretty flippant. I was like, why don't you ask your daughter to do that? And she laughed and she said, oh, I'm just saying you have a nice body, but you wouldn't suggest that your teen daughter do that. So why would you suggest that I do that? I am gainfully employed right now in a student worker position. I don't need to dance at Coyote Ugly. I'm a college student. And so some of those different things, and we'll talk about those macro and microaggressions, those small things that add up to this white rage and then moves into that Black fatigue. So let's keep that in mind, that white rage definition as we move forward. So Dr. Anderson goes into the 5 movements in history addressed. And this is going to be the one that we're in right now, this George Floyd era that kicked off everything. I do believe there is going to be some backlash. We see some backlash happening now, but there's going to be, and we see it now, white rage going on because of the uprising and the perceived advancement, or us trying to advance Black lives. So she covered these 5 movements in history. She addressed those in her book. If you haven't, I got it on Audible. And so if you have not yet, I encourage you to check it out. It's a great history lesson, first and foremost. And I think that's really important for us as Blacks, because if you are now looking at what's going on and not comprehending it or understanding it, it really is a rerun. It's a rerun of so many times that we've tried to get ahead and said the same things. We're not saying new things. But she goes through each of these different movements and talks about when we had gained some type of footing, we were met with white rage. And the white rage looked different in those different eras, right? Of course, burning of things, of people, of places, of buildings, of course, laws. I remember going to the African American Museum of Free People of Color in New Orleans, and learning more about the laws in Louisiana that were changed when we started advancing, when they saw that the free people of color began to buy up real estate, own businesses, and gain footing. There were barriers put in place. There was some white rage, and it came through the judicial system, our political systems, and things like that. And so she went through the Reconstruction era. She went through the Great Migration. In fact, I want to encourage you on my next slide. I'm going to encourage you to get this book about the Great Migration of our people, of Black people, when we tried to get ahead. Everyone's very familiar with some of the more notable events with Black Wall Street. But in my studies, I learned about the Red Summer. And so Black Wall Street was rolled into that. So there was several outbreaks of racial riots where they decimated Black people because of getting ahead, because we wanted to advance. Of course, the Civil Rights era, again, that's covered, I think, these days in school. I know I learned at least about that. A lot of the other stuff I hadn't learned about in my school days, but the Civil Rights era, a little bit was touched upon that. And of course, the most recent was our Black president, in which we're going through some of this right now. The voter suppression resurfaced when Obama was elected to roll back those laws that happened way in the Reconstruction era, actually, voting Black men only, not us Black women, but Black men were given the right to vote in the Reconstruction era. And that's a long time ago. And then here it goes, here we are now questioning whether we should have that should continue. So again, the rolling back. So I want to leave you with this resource for the Great Migration that I told you about. Someone gifted this to me. Very thick book, very dense, but full of information on the Great Migration of Black folks and where we went, what we did, what we were met with, but really good book. So check that out. In addition to White Rage, great history lesson. I actually, again, I did that one on Audible, but I have the other one in print. So whatever way you like to get your information. So now I want to address some keywords, because I want to help us identify, as Mika talked about, healing sessions and bringing this out to our community, arming ourselves with this information, because things can be happening to you, in front of you. You'll see it and don't know what it is, or don't know how to name it. And I want us to be equipped. And this could be for Black people to be equipped, and this could be for white people to be equipped. So anti-Blackness, some people purport it's not racism. They don't even like to use the word racism, because that's an umbrella term. Racism can happen to any people of color, right? Any person of color. That's an umbrella term. What is said is it's about anti-Blackness, which is anti-Blackness, right? It's not that umbrella term. It's a direct threat to Black people and being Black, right? And because we're in America, I'm gonna say in America. So anti-Black racism, not just racism, it's a specific exclusion and prejudice against people visibly perceived to be of African descent. So I see Ahmed on here, my Somalian brothers and sisters, my Ethiopian brothers and sisters, my Haitian brothers and sisters. If you appear to be Black, right, you get to inherit the things that people associate with that anti-Blackness. So what the world commonly calls as Black people. Being Black is a highly taxed identity. So we pay a lot of taxes for being Black. And I'm not talking about just Uncle Sam, okay? And all non-Black groups benefit from anti-Blackness. And so I know I saw my friend Wilfredo on here, my Filipino brother, and he's always trying to get his people to see how this affects everybody, right? And how we could be contributing to it even if we're not Black. Some people just look at it as this black and white thing, but if you're an other than Black, you enjoy some benefits. You enjoy the benefits from Black people in the anti-Black framework or cycle that we're in. And it illuminates the society's inability to recognize us as human, or our humanity, the disdain, disregard, or disgust for our existence. Now, remember on the first slide, I talked about the white rage is tolerable of us being there, right? We can think back to chattel slavery, when it was okay to have us work for them in the fields, right? So we were tolerable enough to be workers, but there are people that have a disgust, and again, especially with the advancement. I remember thinking through in that museum that I could imagine people getting really upset that they were hoodwinked about who Black people are and what they can do, when we began to prove that we're not what they said we were. I would get upset too that I was hoodwinked, that somebody lied. And the last one is Black people are despised and a useful counterpoint for others to measure humanness against. In other words, while one may experience numerous compounding disadvantages, at least they're not Black. So this is the point that needs to be driven home about when we talk about people in poverty, or people that have trauma, people that have inequities as well. And that, I grew up poor, I understand. I think we've heard that people feel like they understand others that are not Black, that have, it's not that you haven't experienced any hardships in life, but again, at least they're not Black. So this is the anti-Blackness here that we're working with. Some other keywords I want to point out to you: white innocence or white ignorance. So it reflects the idea that white people, in that they experience the privilege of a dominant racial status in a white dominant society, They're generally naive about the realities of race and racism, particularly in systemic and structural senses. I was trying to think about, as I looked over microaggressions, I was trying to think about ones that I encounter, and I can say sometimes I see some people that really don't know that, right, that white ignorance in this white dominated society at work. Someone, and I started getting a little upset, but I was like, you know, I know they don't know. They think it's cute or funny. I don't know. So I have a loud voice. If people have ever been around me, I have a loud laugh, a loud voice, a loud spirit. And I'm unapologetic about that, right? And I noticed that at work, I've been told many times that, oh, it was so quiet when Keisha wasn't here. But, you know, by mostly white counterparts. But I've seen some of my Black counterparts join the wagon. And I started thinking about how in that particular organization, there is a sense of how people communicate, the volume, the way that they speak, the way that they talk, all of that is again shaped in a white dominant society. So if you are loud, that's not fitting in. That looks like an outlier. So that can look like anything to people. That could look professional, that could look rude, it could look obnoxious, right? And it could be that this is the way that I express myself in my culture. My people are colorful, my people are expressive, but in that particular environment, that's a problem. And so I've been pondering how I'm going to address that when I hear coworkers say that and think that's funny. Moving on to white flight. So white flight is another space of racial innocence. So you all might have seen this with our, you know, housing stuff, right? We talked about discrimination before, housing discrimination, redlining, and gentrification, all of this kind of stuff. When whites left certain neighborhoods, and I actually was talking to a housing director that was asking me about New Orleans and whether the housing projects were rebuilt that they had not been rebuilt. And we talked about gentrification of, you know, whites coming in and building these other structures and things like that. And so it's a different look. And how we use code words to talk about, you know, neighborhoods. If there's good schools, you know, it's a white neighborhood. And so we've changed our wording, right, to cover up what we consider, again, areas that are going to help you flourish and other areas that are not. So it's believed that people of color, again, especially Black people, are more prone to crime, and that if too many Black people move into a neighborhood, crime will increase, homes values will go down, and the neighborhood will deteriorate. But white flight can happen in different places, not just in the housing area. It can happen in different spaces where too many of us in one place brings the value down of something. It makes it not attractive anymore if too many of us are there. I saw a advertisement with all Black people for, I believe, the flu shot, flu immunization. And I was like, I've never seen an advertisement with all Black people. Wow. That surprised me. You mean you didn't slip one white person in there or other? I mean, you let them have the entire thing. Okay, this is something that's targeted towards Black people to get immunized. Let's keep that in mind. So let's talk about these microaggressions and macroaggressions. I have a few definitions I want to get out of the way before we get into, and when we go into breakout groups, I want us to begin to share, and we'll have some polls and things like that of some micro or macroaggressions that you've seen happen. So macro, those are the large scale. Those are, I guess we can say explicit, you know, out there, overt aggression towards another race or culture. But I believe the micro is what, when we move into the Black fatigue section and the racial battle fatigue, that's the things that wear people down. Micro, because as you can see, it's brief. So sometimes we don't even see it. That's kind of like what I said about they like, Keisha, it's so quiet when you're not here. Very brief, it can just go like that. You don't even know, but it's commonplace and it's daily. And I could say that for others, it can be moment by moment. Moment by moment. And I have to decide which one do I want to address? Because in a 1 hour meeting, I can address 60 microaggressions that have occurred every minute. And so they're brief, they're commonplace, and they're daily. And so that wears away. It wears away at you. Verbal or behavioral, so it doesn't always have to be something that's said. Indignities that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative attitudes towards stigmatized or culturally marginalized groups. So then it's broken down into some other groups: micro assaults, micro insults, and micro invalidations. So I want to share some examples of how it might look modern day, okay? So micro assaults could be, why are you so angry? Why do you people always play the race card? You have so much passion. Maybe you need to tone it down for the meeting. I don't think that hairstyle is appropriate for work. You are pretty for a dark-skinned girl. You are different, meaning from another Black woman. I've been told that someone told someone else, another Black person, that you're not like Keisha. You're diplomatic. She's too rogue. This was at work. You are different. Oh, I already said that one. Okay. We had another Black woman here a few years ago in our department. She was really nice, but it didn't work out. Those are some micro assaults, right? Just blatant. So let's talk about the micro insults. This one is, I'm sure you've heard it. You are so articulate. Thank you. Encountering mispronunciation of your name over and over again. Can I touch your hair? What is the Black woman's perspective on this? As if I represent all Black women. Encountering an expression of surprise that you're in your role. Oh, you're the manager? A look of surprise or a verbalization of it. I have a good friend who's Black. Those are examples of micro insults. Let's go to micro invalidations. This could be mansplaining or white-splaining, when a man or white woman explains to a Black woman her own experience. Thank you. Having one's input ignored and the same idea accepted from a white person. How about this one? Being mistaken for the other Black woman, the we all look alike syndrome. You should be proud of how far your people have come. I remember when I started going to protests, someone said, you know, something to the effect of, you have made it out of that, like you have arrived of some sort to me, like I'm not a part of that group. Yeah, that's what they told me. And I said, yeah, that I can be in the street shot dead like them too. I'm not fooled into thinking I'm removed from that just because I have advanced a little bit. Being constantly excluded from meeting invites where you should be included. Being ignored in meetings, invisibility. And defensiveness. I had that happen to me too. I'm sure you all have others. But I want you to be able to spot some ways that, because when we saw white rage again in historical ways, and let's take Tulsa, because we know that one so well with Black Wall Street, the idea was to bring us back down to where we belong, where they thought we belonged. Not advancing, but at the bottom. So these microaggressions, macroaggressions, and that white rage in the modern day, it's to bring you down a few notches or more to that hierarchy of that social concept of race. We belong at the bottom. And that is the goal, is to bring you back down there. So I want to do a poll. Mika, can we do a poll? I want to know how many people have had their hair touched at work.
Yes, I've launched the poll there. Can everybody see that poll there?
Okay, so we're doing all three at the same time, Mika.
Yes, you're. Oh, wow.
Okay, so I also want you to answer, I want you to answer 2 and 3 as well. Have you had ethnic slang spoken to you? Hey, girl. Have you been mistaken for other colleagues of color? Now I had on here, I wish I had on this poll, what percentage of the answers are from Black people and what percentage are from white people? But it looks like 100% of people had ethnic slang spoken to them. And let's see here. Someone's been mistaken, 71% have been mistaken for other colleagues of color. It's a 50-50 on having their hair touched at work, while at work. Thank you. Thank you, Mika.
You're welcome.
You can go ahead and close the poll. So I thought I saw my friend on here, Samira, but I don't see her anymore. She sent me something to that I got that idea about getting the hair touched at work. She works for the health department, and she sent us some information on race in the workplace, and I loved that they covered this idea of just that one concept of having your hair touched in the workplace, and the way that it was described with the session that they're doing is they had the white people in the room raise their hand. All people that ascribe to being white, raise your hand. And they also said, keep your hand raised. If you've ever had your hair, people's hands running through your hair at work, and they all put their hands down. And then he had all the Black women raise their hand, or women that ascribe to being Black, raise your hand. And please keep your hand up if you've ever had your hair touched at work. And all of them had their hands still standing, still up. I thought that was so impactful, because the next thing he talked about is, especially to the white group, about touching hair at work, that it must not be an organizational norm, like in the culture, the organizational culture, that's not a norm, or that's not appropriate or acceptable or normal behavior in the workplace. No one touches your hair. But somehow Blacks or Black women specifically, hair is being touched at work, either being asked or not asked. So why is that? Something to think about. Again, these are things that I want you all to be aware of, those differences, those micro, those macro things that happen. I want you to be able to spot those. What about the ethnic slang? Let me go back to that one. So this could happen to other people, of course, of color. So one of the examples that I reviewed when doing this was people speaking Spanish slang to people, Latinx folks. Or as I gave the example, girl, hey girl, right? But you'll never say that to your white counterpart, but you'll say it to me. Is that appropriate? And being mistaken for your other colleagues of color. I think this can also happen with other people of color. So Asian folks experience that as well. From what I was reading, that, yeah, they can get mistaken by, for their other counterparts. And this is when people aren't taking the time to even see you, because again, you're down there. So I haven't even taken the time to do so. However, we all are aware of the people that are either in executive leadership roles or highly visible roles or roles that have authority and power. We know those people. We'll never get them mixed up with anyone. When we place importance on that person, we don't get them mixed up. Something to think about. James Baldwin, I love this quote, because if anyone says, you know what, this is not the truth of the matter, I love it. He was so raw. Every white person in this country, I don't care what they say, knows one thing. They may not know as they put what I want, but they know they would not like to be Black here. If they know that, then they know everything they need to know, and whatever else they say is a lie. They know that something's wrong with being Black in America, and that's something they do not want to be. If they don't know anything else, that's the anti-Blackness messages that have permeated this country. I love when he said that. So what I'd like to do now, we're at almost 7:30 here. What I'd like to do is have us go into breakout rooms. And I want you to share with one another, as Mika was talking about. It's important to tell our stories. It's important to share, even again, amongst people that look like you, because you might miss it, and someone will really school you on what's going on and you don't know. And so we really need to take the time to share with one another when you've experienced white rage, if you have, or if you haven't experienced it, if you've observed it, if you've seen it happening, you didn't know it was happening, but you kind of now think, oh, that is that. I want you to say, I witnessed that. So Mika, if we can go ahead and put our participants in breakout groups, and we'll come back.